Good Monday afternoon to you, 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Hope you had a great weekend. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk a little bit about the Chiefs 49ers Super Bowl in just a few minutes. We begin, though, with some news from Deshaun Watson via social media. Back at it. So getting ready to resume football activities is the assumption. Watson posted this on his Instagram account, Football Field, today. Also, he talked about where he was in his rehab. This is from QB Unplugged with Watson and his quarterback coach, Quincy Avery.
Rehab going really well, man. Right on track where we need to be. Like I said, every week is just an opportunity for us to get better. And, we right on track for what we want to be.
Yeah, I keep hearing you ahead of schedule, so I take on track ahead of schedule. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, most definitely.
With that, let's welcome in Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, as well as BrownZone.com. So, Scott, we heard reports. We finally hear from Deshaun that rehab has progressed. He was kind of cautious, not to say he's ahead of schedule, though.
Yeah, it's interesting. I saw that Instagram video or whatever. To me, the big next step is throwing, right? And, I don't know if that's, when you take the field, it could just be running. It could be doing footwork drills. I'm interested in when he can throw again and then how that goes, right? Because that's the big issue with the shoulder. And I think when we talked to him in November, or either right before the surgery, he said, I thought he was aiming toward early spring to be able to throw again. So to me, that's the milestone. If the Browns expect him to be ready in the spring, which is what Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski said, that means you have to start throwing, right? February, March, you can't just show up the first day. So I'm interested to see when he can start doing that.
Yeah, the other thing, touched on a number of topics. So he was asked about Ken Dorsey, Brown's new offensive coordinator.
I'm excited, bro. I'm super excited, especially going back to his history. First off, a former player, especially at the collegiate level, but a little bit in the pros. I know he bounced around a little bit, but he still had that quarterback experience. And then being able to, go through the history of his coaching career, leading all the way back to Carolina. And I think he made a couple stops between going before Buffalo. So, and then being able to call, plays in big games like the AFC Championship and divisional round and, just regular big games throughout the regular season. So while he was in Buffalo. So it's been good. I think he was a quarterback coach for Cam when he won the MVP, took him to the Super Bowl. I think the last couple of years, Josh, everyone knows what Josh been doing up in Buffalo. I think he came second and third a couple of times for the MVP. So, yeah, man, I'm super excited to just get up there in Cleveland and get the playbook and just learn from him. And I heard his press conference too. That was dope to be able to hear what he said. Made me one of those top quarterbacks again. So that's the key.
Scott, I know you two things. He mentioned play calling with Ken Dorsey, so that I thought that was a little interesting. And I know you also wrote an article about the staff could lead to a new look offense. Take us through that whole article and the dynamic, just what you were thinking with this.
Sure. I mean, first, I just think it's interesting that, like Watson's looking at Ken Dorsey's resume, just like the rest of us are, right? Okay, he did this with Cam Newton, he did this with Josh Allen, these are the kind of numbers he had. I think that's all you can go on, even if you're a media member or a player, based on, until you get to know the guys, right? Until Deshaun Watson sits in a room with Ken Dorsey day after day. I know they've talked, but it's not the same. So he looks at that. And then, the article, Dorsey and Stefanski made references to from the ground up. Like, they're going to examine everything with this offense as they try to meld their philosophies. And we don't know how different, Kevin Stefanski's is from Ken Dorsey, their philosophies. And we know Kevin Stefanski has been. You can look at some of the Ken Dorsey tape in Buffalo. It doesn't look night and day different from what the Browns do. But there is, a lot of Josh Allen runs, right? I think they spread it out perhaps more. So, his experience with the dual threat guys like Josh Allen and Cam Newton, it's just, to me, it's a matter of incorporating that into what the Browns do and what the Browns tried to do last year. We've talked about it. More shotgun, right? More RPOs, more three wide personnel stuff Deshaun Watson likes to do. And you would think, at least I believe that the Browns' goal was to get an offensive coordinator that could help in that transition. And so it's going to be fascinating to see just how different it can look with the new coordinator, whether or not he calls the plays. Just you get more new voices. You get the Tommy Rees voice, right? You get the Deuce Staley voice. So Tommy Rees brings the college experience. Just how different this offense will look next year.
The other thing is, as we were talking through that, it just kind of clicked with me. When you talk about Josh Allen and Cam Newton, those are different levels of quarterback than Kevin Stefanski has had. Even going, Kirk Cousins is a nice quarterback, but I don't think you would put him quite in the Josh Allen or, even the Cam Newton stratosphere. Newton was pretty good for a couple of years.
Yeah, he was the MVP, right? Went through Super Bowl. So I think you're right about that. And there's probably a dynamic to that, right? When you're coaching an upper echelon quarterback. And I don't think that'd be an issue for Kevin Stefanski. And, I'm sure Deshaun Watson thinks of himself like that, right? That he's an upper echelon guy, 3-time Pro Bowler, led the league in passing. So, but I'm sure there's a dynamic there. There's an ego there. And Ken Dorsey, having played the position at a high level in college, having been around guys in the NFL as a player and then as a coach, he should have no trouble, with Deshaun Watson being hopefully the next guy in line. And I think it's interesting. Talk about ego. Deshaun Watson said he liked hearing Ken Dorsey say, I want to get him back to being a top-tier guy. Like, that resonated with him, and that, to me, that was the theme of Ken Dorsey's introductory press conference.
Yeah. You know what? If Ken Dorsey does that, he becomes the next hot head coaching candidate as well, in all likelihood. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's great. That's what you want.
Well, yeah, because the Browns would be good, right? You'd assume they go in the playoffs, win games in the playoffs, if Watson is playing like a top, 5-7 quarterback.
All right, let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason for the first time today.
Ask Mr. Stefanski, who's now Coach of the Year again and will never win a Super Bowl at all if he continues to do what he's doing as a coach. Those two coaches coached the team. I hope he watched it. They were involved in everything that the team did. It's unfortunate that someone had to lose, but tell him to keep an eye on that because we're going to build a new stadium and we're going to do this. They're never going to win anything with Coach Stefanski as their coach or even Andrew Berry. I hope they watched and I hope maybe he listened about something. Give up the play calling and coach the team. Thanks, guys. I'll talk to you again. Take care. Bye now.
All right, that's Jim from Rochester. You know what? It's kind of interesting. I was talking earlier today. Andy Reid, for the first 10 years of his career, was the guy that couldn't win the big game. Now it's Kyle Shanahan that can't win the big game. Everything has to align. And if you think about the Super Bowl yesterday, Patrick Mahomes didn't look great until the game was on the line.
No, you're right about that, and it's a great point about Andy Reid, right? I mean, people were criticizing him. I'm sure I know people are criticizing Kyle Shanahan, and there's a couple points there. One, like when you look back on it, the game's over. Patrick Mahomes wins 2 in a row, 3 out of 5, right? And it feels inevitable after the fact. Oh, it's Patrick Mahomes. You knew he was going to lead that tying field goal drive. You knew he was going to lead that winning touchdown drive in overtime. Well, I mean, that's how it worked out. But there's 10 plays in that game that if they go the other way, the Chiefs don't win. And it's not inevitable, and you can beat Patrick Mahomes, right? So you do need things to come together. Now, it helps to have the best quarterback in the league. There's no doubt about it. And he helps create the inevitabilities, right? But on 4th and 1, what if it's a bad snap? And there were about 20 bad snaps. It felt like he was reaching down to the ground all day. What if it bounces, he gets stuck, Bosa hits him, right? Game's over. I mean, there's a million things like that where he makes the right decision, things go their way, and it happens. So it just tells you how, the margin for error is so small in this league and on that stage. But then, to get to the caller, I mean, I love the passion. But Andy Reid calls the plays. Kyle Shanahan calls the plays. Every time the camera shows Kyle Shanahan, he's looking at his play sheet, even when they're on defense. So I just think that's a misconception. I think it's an incorrect narrative involving Kevin Stefanski. He's not any different than those guys when it comes to being involved. They do the same roles. He has the same roles. Sean McVay, they do the same thing. And those guys all get to Super Bowls and win Super Bowls, and it's not because they don't call the plays.
So we just saw the Chiefs, the Niners. What do you think how far are the Browns away from that team-wise, and what do you think the biggest difference is?
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard, right? Because, the Ravens could have easily been there, right? And you're saying, well, how far away are the Ravens? Well, they're not. Like, they could have won that game. And the Browns beat the Ravens, and the Browns beat the 49ers. So I think if you just look at the roster, the Browns are right there. I look at the defensive line that San Francisco had, and I think the Browns compares to that. Even the skill position players we talked about before the show, Dave, I think the Browns skill position guys are as good as Kansas City's. Now, they don't have Patrick Mahomes, right? And I can combine him and Andy Reid. They don't have the experience of those guys either, or the experience of that franchise. And that helps a ton. When you've been there, you've done it. Your best guys have been there and done it. Chris Jones, Travis Kelce, right? Obviously, Mahomes. That makes a big difference. So I think, the only way the Browns do that is by continuing to go to the playoffs, continuing to win games, or winning games when you get there, and you build up that resume, you build up that the muscle memory you have of winning games in big-time moments. But I would say the one biggest thing is your quarterback has to play at a high level in the playoffs. And Brock Purdy's done that, especially in the big moments, right, in this playoffs. In the second half, he had 2 really good second halves leading to the Super Bowl. I thought he played pretty well yesterday. And then you have Mahomes, right? And the difference maybe in that AFC Championship game was Lamar Jackson didn't play great. So and I hate to boil it down to just your quarterback, but it matters a ton. And you need to have that chance in the AFC playoffs and the Super Bowl. You need Deshaun Watson to play at a level close enough to Patrick Mahomes or Brock Purdy or Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, to feel like the rest of your team can get you over the hump. And we just haven't seen that from Deshaun Watson in his 2 years with the Browns.
Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, as well as BrownsZone.com. And I'm going to step aside, take a quick time out. We'll head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. We'll also hear Deshaun Watson on Kevin Stefanski and his offensive system. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
You might have expected all the games and all the excitement. And even though you couldn't see it right away, it's all right here. 5 games in one. $22 million in prizes between $25 and $500, and a shot at $1 million grand prize. Golden Casino. A night's worth of excitement for just $10.
We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrak from the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, as well as BrownsZone.com. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
There's been a lot of rhetoric surrounding Stefanski and Coach of the Year, and moreover, a lot of hyperbole surrounding any critiquing of Stefanski. I believe that he deserved to win Coach of the Year, that it's a rightful win for him. That being said, I just think that it's a little bit hyperbolic to take yourself back and not be able to critique the fact that he's head coach and calling offensive plays. Creates a unique dynamic when it comes to hiring offensive coordinators, which the Browns just had to go through. Stefanski is a great head coach, but maybe he should delegate offensive play calling to the offensive coordinator. So that's just kind of where I stand with that. Thank you guys for what you do. I feel like you guys give a really great, balanced opinion, and looking forward to seeing the Browns play next year. Go Browns.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Scott, the Coach of the Year, he certainly deserved it, but I wouldn't have been able to argue if you'd have given it to D'Amico Ryans of the Texans or Dan Campbell of the Lions. I think, you know what, but 4 quarterbacks, you won games with 4 different quarterbacks. So we just got done talking about how important quarterback play is.
That's exactly right, Dave. And it's a regular season award, right? So he does not lose the head-to-head to D'Amico Ryans in the playoffs. People need to remember that. 11-6 with the quarterback situation and all the injuries, including Nick Chubb. You can argue he's the best player, second best player on this team. That's a big deal. And, D'Amico Ryans, they wind up tying in the voting. Stefanski wins the award because they had one more first-place vote. But D'Amico Ryans took a 3-13 team, or I think it was 3-13-1 team, to the playoffs. They win the division. That's a huge turnaround first year. He was certainly deserving. Dan Campbell, there's other guys. But I think Kevin Stefanski was certainly deserving of that award. We're here every day. I'm around it every day. I think he did a tremendous job getting the Browns to where they were. And I thought the caller, it's interesting. If the fact is, or the belief is that Kevin Stefanski calling plays hurts who they get as a coordinator, like I'll listen to that argument. Whether or not he's a good play caller, I think he is. I don't think it affects the rest of his job. But if you're talking about, does it limit the candidates that he could hire for coordinator, especially if he continues to call the plays as opposed to hand them to Ken Dorsey, then that's a legitimate point to bring up, in my opinion.
Yeah, and the one thing to remember is he got the head coaching job because of his offensive mind. So I get why he might not want to give that up, but we'll see. We'll see how that plays out. Well, Deshaun Watson, again from QB Unplugged with Quincy Avery, who's his quarterback coach, just talked about Kevin Stefanski and this offense.
Kevin got a brilliant mind. You know, the way he called plays, the way he operates, and the way he kind of game plan throughout the week. He's very, very smart and very detailed. And then along with Ken coming in, then you got the other guys, you know what I'm saying, that we added to the offensive coaching staff. So, I mean, we got some firepower in the coaching. Now we just gotta, teach it, learn it, and shit, we gotta execute it on Sunday.
And Scott, you can tell there's a little bit of enthusiasm by Deshaun. He doesn't have to say those things about Kevin Stefanski and his offense. I mean, it's not. He kind of took it there when he asked him about the offense.
Yeah, and I think it's helpful to remember some of the stuff Deshaun Watson said in the past. Remember, he said, and you can take it with a grain of salt. The Browns paid him a bunch of money to come here, but he said Kevin Stefanski was a big reason that he came to Cleveland, and Stefanski took his surface playbook, whatever it was, to Houston for those meetings and sat down and showed him film and said, hey, you can fit in my offense, or this is what we'll do to maximize your skill set, all those things that we can work together. And, I'm sure the $230 million helped, but I believe that had a role in Deshaun Watson saying, okay, I can go have success in Cleveland. And I don't think that's changed in the 2 years they've been together. Of all the knocks that there are on Kevin Stefanski, and some, I think less warranted than others, one of them can't be his, intelligence, right? He's a really smart guy. His brain works really fast. It works really fast calling plays. It works fast designing game plans. You can just see it during the game. And I'm sure Deshaun Watson recognizes that. And to me, that's not, you can't criticize Kevin Stefanski for that. I think he thinks and sees the game at a high level, and that translates to the game day on Sunday.
So this is from Jeremy Fowler, ESPN. Expect contract extensions to occur for Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry this offseason. Both have matching 5-year deals that will expire after the 2024 season, so that's next year. Performed well this year. Executed a playoff push. All signs point to them being in Cleveland for the foreseeable future. It's kind of a unique reporting structure, too. Both of those guys report to Jimmy Haslam. So I think some fans don't realize it's not Kevin Stefanski doesn't report to Andrew Berry. Both are parallels, if you will. I think DePodesta's ahead of them, and then, Jimmy Haslam's there as well.
Yeah, it is interesting. And first of all, we've been saying they're going to get extensions forever, right? I think, I wrote a column saying Kevin Stefanski should get one in, November, and then I wrote one in December. Yeah, give one to Andrew Berry, too. The season was just too good. Where they are in the, coming into their last year, you can't let them be lame ducks. It just makes sense. And I expect them to get them soon. I don't know if that means tomorrow. I don't know if it means right before the combine, whatever. I expect them to get extensions in this offseason and pretty early in this offseason. But you're right. In part of it, Andrew Berry is Stefanski's boss, right? He talks about Kevin Stefanski when we interview him. And, I think he evaluates Kevin Stefanski as a GM. And I'm sure he gives DePodesta and the Haslams his opinion of Stefanski as a coach, right? Because that's just kind of how the hierarchy of the league is. But you're right. There's different reporting structures. We need to remember there was an assumption that Andrew Berry would be the GM when they had the search in 2020. But Kevin Stefanski was hired first, right? So it wasn't like Berry got hired and then hired Stefanski, right? They were separate hirings, separate processes. Now, they were always in tandem, but it is different than a normal, not a normal, but maybe an old-fashioned GM coach setup.
All right, so this one from CBSSports.com. One thing every NFL team must do in the offseason for the Browns, add wide receiver help for Deshaun Watson. Cooper is the lone reliable option at wide receiver. Perhaps Elijah Moore is better in year 2 with the Browns, but Cleveland needs help at the wide receiver position regardless. So, Scott, I'm sure we've talked about this. Do you expect them to add a wide receiver through free agency, draft, or trade? And how big of a name do you think they go out and get?
Yeah, to me, this is a fascinating one, Dave. We have talked about the need for a receiver, obviously. I think you could go multiple ways. And I don't, I'm not trying to, not give you an answer here, but like part of me says you bring Amari Cooper back for his last season, pay him the $20 million. And if you do that, then I think you draft a receiver early. And you go Cooper, the receiver, the draft pick, Elijah Moore, Cedric Tillman, David Bell, then you probably sign a lower level veteran guy in that, in kind of the vein of a Marquise Goodwin from a year ago. And you go, okay, that's our group. But I also could see a scenario where they say, I don't think Andrew Bayer wants to pay 2 receivers big time money. I just don't think he wants to do. They did it with Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham Jr. And I don't think he wants to repeat that. But could you do it for 1 year? Where you let Cooper's contract ride, so you pay him the $20 million, and for 1 year you go get a T. Higgins type guy, and he gets $25 million or $28 million, and then he becomes the number one. He becomes your big money guy, and then you go younger after 2024. Like I don't think you can rule out that scenario. So I could see it go a couple different ways. My first thought is to draft a guy early, but I wouldn't be surprised if they did any of those 3 avenues. I really wouldn't.
Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram and BrownsZone.com, and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Plus, we'll go through some of the Browns rookies, what kind of years they had. Sports for CLE, be right back.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns here on Sports for CLE with Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter from the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, BrownsZone.com. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
I think last night's Super Bowl really proved that the run can only get you so far, and you even have to go beyond the scheme to win that type of game. And so for us to reach the Super Bowl, Kevin and Ken Dorsey is going to have to really go through a stretch where we have to be balanced but also be good at each thing. So not just depending on the run, but also be able to pass well and even design runs for Deshaun Watson and even doing some shovel, read options, zone read, everything to get Deshaun and the team in a better position to win football games.
So I always appreciate all the voicemails. Scott, I think the Super Bowl, I think it hit home with how important quarterback play is. That was my big takeaway.
Yeah, especially when you get late, right? Like, at halftime, I might have heard some of the analysts saying, "Hey, you got to get back to the running game," and obviously, that's part of it. And Christian McCaffrey had a big game, catching and receiving. I thought the Chiefs, they stuck with the run. There were some runs in the second half that didn't really hit, but they kept going back to it because you can't just drop back a million times. Especially the way the offensive line struggled on the edges. Bosa had a huge game for the Niners. But when push comes to shove, when you need to rally, when, there's the 4th and 1, like even that call, I think it's really hard for a play caller to say, I'm going to hand it to my guy and we're going to run into the middle of the line. Like that puts a lot of faith in a lot of people where if you roll out Mahomes, it's Patrick Mahomes, right? And he can either keep it or throw a 4-yard pass to somebody. Which is why, it's the quarterback and it de-emphasized the running game to at least some extent.
All right, this from BrownsWire.com, grading every rookie's season from the Browns. We'll go through some of the guys on offense. So they go wide receiver Cedric Tillman. They give him a C-. Struggled to expand his route tree. Appeared to run the wrong routes more than one occasion. Has to continue to improve, but his combination of size, athleticism, strong hands could help develop him into a solid pass catcher for the Browns. I don't know if he ran the wrong route. I think, Scott, there were some nuanced things where, he didn't break it off at the correct. I don't think it was necessarily the wrong route. It's you can't let a defender get leverage inside you because this is the NFL and everybody's athletic.
Yeah, he might not have seen the coverages like the quarterbacks did, and that cost him, right? I don't remember the exact numbers, but I know at one point, three or four Flacco's interceptions were headed for Tillman. I think of the Chicago game, he didn't cut in front of the defender, and that leads to the interception. You can call it a wrong route, you can call it a wrong read of the coverage, whatever it is. And I want to say the Jets game, and they were in the red zone. They went for it on fourth down, and Tillman ran like a little skinny post, but he kept it straighter than bending it. And Flacco, this is as upset as I've seen Joe Flacco. He was visibly set. He's like, you can tell him making arm gestures like, hey, you ran it wrong. Like, it's a touchdown if you run it right. So there's certainly room for Tillman to improve. I think that would be area number one. But having said that, I like the hands that he showed. I thought they were strong. The couple that he didn't have a ton of catches, but he ran hard when he did catch the ball. His size is obvious, and it showed up in games, right? Once he started to play more after the Donovan Peoples-Jones trade. So I just think it's going to take some time. It's a learning curve. And I even flash back to being at the Greenbrier, and I talked to Tillman at the Greenbrier about this. There was one drill, and you watch all these drills, where Chad O'Shea, the receivers coach, had him run the same route like 4 times. And it's just on air. And he kept screwing it up, and they kept rerunning it. And it's just, you come into the league, and that's something some guys take longer to figure out.
Yeah, the other thing, he showed up as a blocker in the run game pretty big time, and that's why you would expect more time to develop for guys drafted later in general. Third-round pick, he's probably on target for a third-round pick. All right, this guy's ahead of schedule, though. DeJuan Jones, another guy that they took a tackle. They give him an A, stepped in right away through he needs to work on his run blocking. Hard to argue he isn't already a borderline elite pass protector. Let's lump in the quarterback that they took in the 5th round, Dorian Thompson-Robinson. They grade him with a C. DTR, great arm to push the ball downfield, though his deep ball accuracy needs some improvement. When you look at Jones in particular, it's hard to argue. He played like a first rounder.
Yeah, he did, and that analysis is right on. The run blocking wasn't good enough. You talk to coaches, you talk to his teammates. That's where he needs to get better. And you would assume with the feet he has, with the size he has, and I think he's got some nasty in him. I think that showed up. There's no reason he can't become that elite run blocker. I don't know if he was borderline elite, but he was really good as a pass protector, like really good. And you expect him to only get better, right? Assuming he works hard, assuming all those things. Comes back from injury, keeps his weight under control. All those questions everybody had before the draft. He put them all to sleep when he played and played really well. Now you got to figure out where he fits, right? Because a tackle situation we don't know, but he was certainly a big surprise, right? I think a pleasant surprise from this draft class. And you can say that a lot of Andrew Berry's rookies don't have instant success, but he certainly did.
Yeah, he made the draft class. You didn't have a first-round pick. You didn't have a second-round pick. You end up getting a guy that looks like he's going to be a starter for several years in the 4th round. Dorian Thompson-Robinson, again, this was a guy as a 5th-round draft selection at quarterback. You don't expect him to play. So I'm not down on him in the least. It's going to take him some time to figure out the NFL game.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think it's interesting because if he hadn't played, the Browns might have thought, okay, we can trust him to be the backup year 2. He's been around. But the fact that he did play, at least it gives me pause whether you can count on him to be the number 2 next year, especially given Deshaun Watson's injury history this year, right? 2023, missed time twice with the shoulder, season ending, all that, coming off an unusual injury for an NFL quarterback. So I think you need to do better than Thompson Robinson is the backup next season. And you might not have known that if he hadn't played, right? So I think the Browns probably realize that from seeing him play. But there's a chance that he develops to the point where he can be your number 2. The thing about him is his arm's weird because I think there's a combine number where he had led the combine in RPMs or the record number, but it doesn't always translate, right? Like we don't see him push the ball down the field. So I think it's there, but maybe all the circumstances need to be right for it's there. He doesn't have the consistent arm strength that you see, obviously Joe Flacco's got it, but even from a Deshaun Watson, I just don't see that out of DTR.
Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter from the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, as well as BrownsZone.com, and I are going to step aside, take one more time out. Other side of the break, we'll hear what Deshaun Watson thinks the offense with Ken Dorsey as the offensive coordinator will look like. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter from the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, as well as BrownsZone.com. So Deshaun Watson on QB Unplugged with his quarterback coach, Quincy Avery, on what Ken Dorsey will bring to this offense next season.
But the thing about Dorsey that I see every time I cut on the tape, and I think it's something going to mesh super well with your game, is that man going to push the ball down that fucking field now.
Oh, for sure. He going to spread it out, too. Hey, it's 5 wide. You might have a receiver. You might have a Coop at running back. You might have Chubb at receiver. Like, it's everything. And then, throughout the course of the process, I'm actually out here in L.A. training with a couple guys that actually played in Buffalo. And once they heard the news and I asked them about Ken, and they were like, man, it's super exciting. You know what I'm saying? And how he want to score a lot of points. He want to be the top offense in the league, and he want everybody to just be successful. And I think, having that mindset, he's not directing just one player. Whoever get the ball is going to get open. You know what I'm saying? So, that's the key.
So, Scott, when you listen to that, expect spread out. That would mean some shotgun. The things that we thought might happen last year seem like they're more likely to be integrated because of the changes.
I'd agree with that. And it was such a small sample size, right? I mean, he gets hurt week 3. So you saw 3 weeks, at the beginning of the season. 1, there was a weather game in the opener. Play Pittsburgh. It's always a tough matchup. And then they play Tennessee. And then Deshaun Watson gets hurt, and then, it's in and out of the lineup after that. I just think it was tough to see the full evolution of the offense from 2022 to 2023. I think there were signs that it was different. Now, not like night and day different, but changes. And I think we'll just see more on that scale that we talked about earlier. I just don't know how far down that scale you go with Ken Dorsey, with Tommy Rees, with Deuce Staley. Maybe it's completely different. I find that hard to believe. I think it'll be somewhat similar, but I think there'll be more differences. I think there'll be obvious differences, and maybe it is the 4 and 5 wide, right? And you see the Browns go empty, but you rarely see them go. I mean, they did some 4 wide, but that would be a change. I like the fact that Watson talks about pushing the ball down the field. That's something he's always been good at. And I think Kevin Stefanski's open to that. I know he is, right? He talks about the explosive plays and how you need those. But maybe Ken Dorsey adds another influence where you see more of those shots, right? But Deshaun Watson's got to sit in the pocket long enough to let those develop. So there's a lot goes into it, but I think that excitement, at least it felt genuine from Watson talking about this.
All right. The old adage is defense wins championships. Take a look at where Super Bowl teams have ranked. This is since 2020. Regular season EPA per play. So the x-axis, that's across, offensive rank in EPA per play. Y-axis, defensive rank per play. Yeah. And you see the Broncos, the only one that were elite defensively. The offense, this graphically shows what we have kind of thought. You have to have a really good defense to get to the, or a good defense to get into the playoffs. But to beat really good teams, you got to have a really good offense.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, there's some good defenses that's near the top, right? I mean, the Broncos, what an outlier. They had such a bad offense, but the defense carried them. And if I'm thinking of the right team, it was a Super Bowl too, right? Like,
yep,
they dominated. Peyton Manning didn't do much, and they win the Super Bowl because the defense was unbelievable. But I mean, how consistent is that? You have big-time offenses year in and year out. And, I think there's been some of a shift, right? The scoring was down a little bit this year. But even with that, the best teams have the best offenses, have the best quarterbacks, have the best play callers. And that's a pretty stable trend we've seen for a while now.
And even the rules are kind of tilted towards the offense having an advantage, more so than they used to be. I mean, think about...
No, there's no doubt.
Yeah.
There's no doubt. I mean, they might throw in that hip drop, right?
Right.
And I know, the players are fighting that, but that's not helping the defense, right? Taking away, they can tackle a guy isn't helping anybody, at least on defense.
All right. I know you're an article, Myles Garrett, deserving to be the defensive player of the year. There's some... Micah Parsons kind of came to his defense, said he should have been. T.J. Watt thought he should have been. Again, that's one of those. Any of those three, if you want to convince me, I'd listen, and you probably could make an argument. But if you see Myles Garrett week in and week out, Jim Schwartz is the one that said it. The first thing they do when they're talking about the Browns defense, how do we make 95 not a problem?
Yep. And I've been thinking of that since the end of the season. I got it written before, the night before the honors, because I really believe that. And I fought with people who think it should be T.J. Watt. And I get it. Like, if T.J. Watt had won, I wouldn't have been, oh my gosh, Myles Garrett got, like, it was a horrendous snub. But I believe Myles Garrett deserved to be the Defensive Player of the Year. And I think he's week in and week out more dominant. I think he does different things than T.J. Watt. I think life is easier for T.J. Watt. And part of it's the 3-4 scheme they run that gets T.J. Watt more one-on-ones. I understand that. But there's also consistent double and triple teams on Myles Garrett that I don't think T.J. Watt faces. And the ESPN stats show that, right? The win rate goes to Myles Garrett. The double team rate goes to Myles Garrett. Right up, Micah Parsons is 1, and Garrett's 2. And T.J. Watt's down a little bit. Garrett's the only one of those three guys in the top 10 as a run defender win rate. And so he just does so much and draws so much attention. And you mentioned the coaches paying attention to him. Jim Schwartz said that. I was in the bowels of SoFi Stadium when Sean McVay drove by Myles Garrett and stopped and told him that he wrecked his week trying to prepare for him. And that was as real as it gets. And I know people prepare for T.J. Watt. I don't think it's nearly the same. And I felt Myles Garrett was dominant, even despite the dip at the end of the season, which was more sack-related than performance-related, I felt.
All right. Before I let you go, so the Eagles' all-pro edge rusher Hassan Reddick has received permission to seek a trade following another disruptive season featuring double-digit sacks. 29-year-old, 27 sacks over the last 2 seasons in Philadelphia. Could land elsewhere. That's from Ian Rappaport. Jack Duffin from the Orange and Brown Report does the math here. due $15.5 million in 2024. Seems like someone that is due to get cut. That would be his guess if he's traded. Likely to be a later pick, a la Amari Cooper. Reddick's certainly a guy. He's more of the outside linebacker, and it's not as much of a scheme fit. But I would imagine they'd find a way to make very good use of him if he became available for a 5th, 6th round pick.
Yeah, it's interesting. I love the idea of that type of player. I don't know if I love the idea of that player. And part of it's a scheme, right? He's not the biggest guy. He's not a set the edge 4-3 end. He's more of a third down situational pass rusher. And those guys have unbelievable value. But, Obo Okoronkwo kind of plays that same role. So I just don't know if he's a perfect fit. But I'll say this. I would not rule out the Browns making their number one offseason acquisition a defensive end. It could be a defensive tackle, right? Like, I could see that right along with receiver. I think those are the glaring spots. And if they had to trade a 5th-round pick for a guy, if they had to pay a guy, $15 million's a lot opposite Myles Garrett, right? Myles is making, I think, 25. Like, that's a lot. But the 10 to 12, which maybe I'm splitting hairs here, that feels like the right number at the right spot. I'm just not sure Reddick's the right guy.
Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter from the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, as always. Great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Scott.
Thanks, Dave.
Scott Petrak, make sure you check him out. Brownzone.com on the internet. He is also the beat reporter for the Browns for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram in print. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. We continue talking Browns. Mac Robinson, 92.3 The Fan. Straight ahead. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
You might have expected all the games, and all the excitement. And even though you couldn't see it right away, it's all right here. 5 games in one. $22 million in prizes between $25 and $500, and a shot at $1 million grand prize. Golden Casino, a night's worth of excitement for just $10.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams. I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Emmanuel Acho on why Kevin Stefanski was deserving to be named Coach of the Year this season. This from FS1's Speak.
We've never seen a team with 5 different starting quarterbacks win 11 games. Now, to Shady's point, voting occurred before the playoffs. If voting would have occurred after the playoffs, I believe in head-to-heads, I think that would have swayed several voters. But then the other thing I'm sitting here thinking about is, to me, in my mind, it is easier to win with a first-round pick at quarterback, rookie or not, than it is to win with Joe Flacco, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, P.J. Walker, Deshaun Watson, and whoever else that they started, because they started 5. So when I was thinking about it, I'm like, this dude won with 5 different QBs, and not only that, half your team got hurt. Nick Chubb, best running back in football, second best running back in football. Christian McCaffrey, I believe, has taken that throne. But up until 2 years ago, we would have said Nick Chubb, best running back in football, he gone. Jedrick Quills, he gone. So what Kevin Stefanski did, and then last thing I'll say is this. Let's not act like the Cleveland Browns are a good organization. Let's not all of a sudden start rewriting history. The Browns are the Texans, if not worse. And I would say they're worse. So let's not start acting like what Stefanski did with the Browns is not just as impressive. Because the Texans are bad and the Browns are historically bad. The Browns are just historically worse than the Texans.
Let's welcome in Mac Robinson from 92.3 The Fan. They're starting to get things right, but Mac, I said earlier, if you would have voted Dan Campbell, D'Amico Ryans, or Kevin Stefanski Coach of the Year, you couldn't really have argued, but the injuries making it to the playoffs were pretty impressive.
Yeah, and Dave, you're completely right. You know, when it comes to the injuries that piled up, you know, he mentioned it's not easy to win with, you know, Joe Flacco and all these guys. Yeah, C.J. Stroud was a number 2 pick in the draft last year. And there's a reason why he went that high. Meanwhile, you have P.J. Walker, who spent more time in the XFL and obviously had his accolades there, but had to go to the XFL before coming back to be a backup for Carolina and Chicago before coming to Cleveland. Dorian Thompson-Robinson went in the 5th round this past season as well. Again, very talented, but very raw prospect. And then also, you know, Joe Flacco, again, he was on his couch by the time that we got to Thanksgiving. He was able to share a Thanksgiving meal, basically, with his family before joining the Browns. And then, you know, you have Deshaun Watson obviously dealing with those injuries. And then, you know, Jeff Driscoll and the way that he played in Week 18, even though as bad as he played, he still got the backup gig over top of P.J. Walker. So, you know, seeing the level of quarterback play that this Browns team had to overcome and really deal with, Kevin Stefanski elevated those guys. And the way that this offensive talent really showed out, Amari Cooper having a historic day. You know, that was fantastic, as well as David Njoku really coming into his own. And that Emmanuel Acho at the end there, I thought was the point. I think he was trying to build it up a little bit more of the Browns have been bad historically. They haven't been bad in the past 5 years, I would say. I would say they've had, obviously, the turmoil with Dorsey. But since Andrew Berry and Stefanski have come in, they've really kind of set the tone for the rest of this franchise. And they've done a good job to set that tone. But on the opposite side of it, you know, I do think that this is an organization and this is a team that I think has really overcome a lot and really bonded well together through the Greenbrier trip, you know, through that West Coast swing in Denver and then LA, staying out there. I thought that this was really a masterclass by Stefanski to really put together all of these guys and really build an actual legitimate culture that isn't forced and isn't just a buzzword that you hear in a press conference.
All right, so this one's from BrownsWire.com. Bang for your buck contributors for the Browns that they could target in free agency. They go running back Zach Moss over the cap, estimates his value at around $4 million a year. Quarterback, they're going to throw out Jameis Winston, estimated value around league minimum. Running back J.K. Dobbins could come cheap because of injuries. Wide receiver Josh Reynolds coming off a 2-year, $6 million deal. Wide receiver KJ Osborne, estimated value of that deal $6.2 million. When you look at the running backs, Moss is intriguing. He did play for the Bills a couple years ago, so he would have the tie to Dorsey. I think J.K. Dobbins is talented. You already have one running back in Nick Chubb that you're trying to get healthy. The veteran that you sign is an insurance policy, so you don't have to rush Nick Chubb until he's ready. I wouldn't do that with another injured guy.
Yeah, I don't want to be going Bon Jovi with the running back room and living on a prayer. You know, I think Zach Moss, I like him, like you mentioned. He has those ties to John Dorsey. I keep on mixing those two up. Ken Dorsey. But, you know, having those ties there as well. But at the same time, you know, somebody like KJ Osborne, I think, is somebody who developed really well with Minnesota. And I think that if you're looking at the value side of it, I think that running back, sure, you can go ahead and add somebody into the mix. I mean, I'm curious as to see whether or not Dearness Johnson could be somebody who comes free in Jacksonville, and if they go ahead and try to bring that back together. But the other thing that we have to keep in mind is the fact that with Andy Dickerson coming in, you know, Bill Callahan was a big part of that running game and how they prepared that running game each and every week. So with Andy Dickerson coming in, I feel like there could be a change a little bit when it comes to the running back styles that we see and how some of these running backs are utilized. Jerome Ford played well last year. At times, his vision was questionable. But at the same time, you had those home run hits from Ford. You had Kareem Hunt that was able to, use some of the last of that gas tank for him as well. But, seeing some of these other running backs and seeing the value that you were able to find, I think the Browns are going to be able to dive into that well a little bit. And it's the reason why I think that particular position, given how loaded that running back class is for free agency, I'll be interested to see what running backs maybe fall down in value a little bit. Ezekiel Elliott was somebody who signed with New England really late in the whole process, right around training camp, right around opening day. So, at that point, that's somebody that, I want to see what talented running backs maybe fall because you have so many guys like Tony Pollard, like Austin Eckler that are going to be hitting the free agent market, along with Derrick Henry, among others. I'll be interested to see how the Browns are able to attack this.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see what they do via free agency. All right, we're going to take a look at a mock draft. This is from Chad Reuter from NFL.com. For the Browns, in round 2, pick 54, they go linebacker Jeremiah Trotter from Clemson. And then in round 3, has them come back and take a running back, Trey Benson, from Florida State. Mac, I would never say never. I'd be surprised if they took, and you never can be surprised by Andrew Berry. See drafting a cornerback last year and him turning out to be pretty good, or 2 years ago rather. But a linebacker doesn't seem like something they would do. If you want to talk to me about a tackle or a wide receiver, a cornerback, even if one jumps up and grabs his attention. But Benson's an intriguing guy. I think they're going to take a running back in the first 4 rounds probably.
Yeah, and that's one thing where I could see Andrew Berry trying to double dip a little bit between, free agency and the draft as well. Again, like you said, Nick Chubb coming off the injury, you want to make sure you have all your I's dotted and T's crossed, so making sure you have all those insurance policies. But at the same time, I also think with linebacker, I could see them, potentially drafting somebody, maybe not with the first pick, because like you mentioned, this is actually a really good offensive tackle class. This is a really good wide receiver class as well. I could see them really attacking those and maybe even the interior of the defensive line as well. But at the same time, I also look at the linebacker position and, in watching the Super Bowl last night, Dre Greenlaw goes down and all of a sudden they have his replacement coming in. His replacement was targeted 9 times and allowed a catch on each target, including a touchdown last night. So really having those linebackers, having that linebacker depth really brought up, I think that's going to be massive, especially when you have somebody like Anthony Walker hitting free agency. I could see them targeting somebody, maybe not the first pick that they have or the second pick, but I could see that being a target later on. But I think that you're onto something there with the running back position, especially really kind of making sure that they have all of their insurance policies taken care of with that position.
Mac Robinson from 92.3 The Fan and I going to step aside, take one more time out. Other side of the break, we'll talk a little bit about the defensive side of the ball and some of the rookies. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
You might have expected all the games and all the excitement. And even though you couldn't see it right away, it's all right here. 5 games in 1. $22 million in prizes between $25 and $500 and a shot at $1 million grand prize. Golden Casino, a night's worth of excitement for just $10.
We continue talking Browns with Mac Robinson from 92.3 The Fan. We've talked about the Browns defense. Take a look at some of the rankings and the numbers. First in total yards allowed, first in first downs allowed, first in pass yards allowed, first in third down percentage, first in fourth down percentage. There's the note's also interesting. The offense led the league in turnovers, which resulted in red zone scoring opportunities, but the Browns defense still second least in points per drive. The defense was really good, and it was the first year in that system. They're going to get a little bit better. Think about that. Let that sink in for a little bit.
It's amazing to think about the fact that, like you said, they are already historic. And especially, usually whenever I'm trying to evaluate a defense, and especially a new defensive coordinator, I'm taking a look at, the first few weeks, giving them a little bit of time to get acclimated, get adjusted. But man, right off the rip, especially this season, it felt like they were already gelling and they were already in place. And like you said, they're going to get better because this is year one. This past year was year one with Jim Schwartz. Now you're getting more players that he's familiar with. You're going to have more players that are coming up. Again, the Eagles have a lot of players that are going to be hitting free agency, obviously headlined by Brandon Graham and Fletcher Cox. So, between those two guys, you're getting those names that are back out there, but also you get a chance for guys that are in the system to get more acclimated with it. Grant Delpit took massive steps throughout this year, obviously earned his contract extension. And then Ronnie Hickman, goes from a guy who was on the roster bubble going into training camp to all of a sudden he's playing meaningful downs. And not only that, playing some of the best football in the league with how well he was playing that safety position and really taking care of that third safety spot that was left by Rodney McLeod when he went down with his season-ending surgery. So, when it came to all of that, this team evolved as the season went along, and they were really dominant throughout this season, especially at home. I think that next year where I want to see the growth, obviously, I want to see those home and away splits maybe come down a little bit. Obviously, we saw that on the road in the playoff game, but I want to see more of just an evenness and more consistent play from the Browns defense and maybe less of a disparity between the home games and the road games.
All right, so BrownsWire.com graded rookie seasons from the Browns. We're going to take a look at a couple of the defensive backs for the Browns. So Cameron Mitchell, they grade him with a B. Showed versatility both in the slot and outside. Outplayed his draft position this year, though he missed some time with an injury. And the other one that we're going to talk about is an undrafted rookie free agent, Ronnie Hickman. You talked about him a little bit. They grade him an A. Tremendous in coverage, playing deep free safeties, despite struggling in that role at Ohio State. No problem playing downhill and physical in the run game. And you can be sure, Mac, you kind of alluded to it. Rodney McLeod, Juan Thornhill, Grant, those guys help a young guy like Ronnie Hickman understand, hey, do this, that'll help you a little bit. There's a lot of that goes on.
Yeah, and that's what I love about this team especially. And, Duron Harmon was a really key addition at the end of the season as well. He was somebody that came in, had the decision to go to the 49ers and decided to go to the Browns with how well they have been playing with that locker room, and on top of it, just the opportunity for him to play more. But at the same time, he talked about just how crucial this locker room really was and how together these guys were culturally. And especially for a young player like Ronnie Hickman, that's massive, especially for somebody who, like I said, he was an undrafted guy. And, it's funny, the fact that, for years we talked and complained about the lack of Buckeyes on the Browns going forward. And all of a sudden now Ronnie Hickman comes in, he's an A. DeJuan Jones, he's an A. He does fantastic work, even though he didn't finish the season healthy. And, between both of those guys, it was a massive turning point for these guys. And the reason why the Browns were even in that position with the way that all those guys went down with injuries. And then also Cameron Mitchell, you mentioned him in there too. He was somebody who, I know they mentioned that he outperformed his draft position, but he really played well, tackled well for the most part, really attacked that slot position where he was able to thrive at Northwestern. And, for him to come in, he has that chemistry with Greg Newsome. And now at this point, I almost look at cornerback as a position where if you need to address another position of need, like offensive tackle, like wide receiver, if you're able to go ahead and package, a cornerback like Greg Newsome, for instance, if you're able to package him along with the draft pick in order to go ahead and get you a better player or an upgrade at a position of need, I think you can go ahead and afford to do that with somebody like Cameron Mitchell and with how well Andrew Berry has done drafting corners over these past few years.
Yeah, that has been – they've struggled finding the right wide receiver. They haven't struggled finding defensive backs. They've got that one down. Mac Robinson, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Mac.
Of course, always happy to hop on with you, Dave.
Mac Robinson, 92.3 The Fan, as always, really good stuff. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.